PharmaVentures, experts in deals and alliances.
Hello and welcome to PharmaVentures Insights here in Berlin. Money is a key component for any biotech or pharmaceutical company, particularly young ones who are developing and looking to bring new capabilities and drugs to the market. Joining me today on the show is Shiva Dustdar of the European Investment Bank. Shiva, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So perhaps first you could tell us a little bit about the European Investment Bank and what its role is in the pharma and biotech sector.
Sure. So EIB, the European Investment Bank, is the bank of the European Union. We are owned by our 28 shareholders, the member states of the European Union. As you said, we are in fact the largest multilateral bank, and we do most of our lending, in fact 90% of it, in the European Union. We are very active in life sciences. Over the last 10 years, we have financed 8.6 billion in life sciences, of which 8.4 went into European life science companies. So this is a very important sector and one that is also growing in our portfolio.
And before we move on to the sort of investments and transactions you get involved in, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your role as well within the organisation.
Okay, sure. So I've been at the EIB for 14 years. I've come from the private sector, JP Morgan and Fitch. So I'm actually an expert in high-risk financing, so to speak. A few years ago, I was asked to set up what is now called the Innovation Finance Advisory, because what we have realized over the years, it's not enough to just have money available, but you also very often need to give advice to companies which type of financial product is best suited to their need at that current stage of development, and how to actually approach a place like the European Investment Bank in terms of the preparation for due diligence. So the team that I'm heading, which I sort of built up from scratch since 2014 effectively, is a mix of primarily finance professionals who have come from both the private and the public sector. And we provide, so to speak, that additional financial advice, help orient companies. Are they ready for an EIB type financing, or should they maybe tap into other sources in preparation? We also do studies, thematic studies, where we are trying to understand whether our current financial instruments are fit for purpose. We are just about to launch one for life sciences, which I think will be actually quite insightful, because it's going to show that the life science space has a significant funding gap of maybe 25 to 30 billion euro that needs to be covered, and where the current financial instruments, the venture capital market, is important as a source of capital, but not sufficient. Not sufficient in size in Europe, nor in bandwidth, and that perhaps we need to look at additional ways, additional risk-sharing mechanisms, public, private sector, to bring in deep pockets of institutional funding into this important space.
So you talked about a number of things there. So what sort of investments do you make in life science companies, and what sort of companies do you invest in?
So that's obviously a big question, because what I should also say is we have the EIB group, as we call it, which has a subsidiary called the European Investment Fund, EIF. It's the largest fund-of-fund investor in Europe, and also does risk sharing with banks. So therefore, in that part of the group does both equity and debt, but on an intermediate basis. So not directly into companies, but through financial intermediaries. Then we have the bank that primarily provides loans, but we now have also loans that are actually coming into the higher risk space, and we call them either venture, you can either call it venture debt or quasi-equity. So it's somewhere between equity and debt. It's certainly less dilutive than equity, straight equity, but nevertheless, what makes it more like equity is that certainly the risk that we're taking, and also that we would expect certain upside potential, return in case of success. So therefore, very often there are some equity kickers, warrants in such structures. But so I would say the EIB is more on the debt space, and our subsidiary is very active on the venture capital space.
But just like any other investor, and because of the intelligence that you can place behind it, as you said with your advisory angle, you're placing intelligent bets and expect to make a return on it.
Absolutely. I mean, we are a bank. We're AAA rated. We have to follow prudential banking measures. So when we take risk, we need to make sure that the risk is well understood and that the pricing is commensurate with the risk that we have assessed. Now, it doesn't mean that we price everything at market, because in a lot of these things there is no market per se. We're going very often earlier into companies, into investments than perhaps the market would. But nevertheless, there has to be a way of capturing, making sure that the returns cover the risk. Yeah.
So
to be sustainable.
Of course.
Yeah.
Have you got an example or two of the sort of investments you've made, companies you've invested in, you could tell us about?
Yes. So let me tell you, I will tell you of two companies. One in the space of infectious diseases, where we have a very interesting instrument called under the InnoFin program. It's a risk sharing between the European Commission and the European Investment Bank. It's called IDFF, Infectious Diseases, Infectious Finance Facility. And there we have recently signed a transaction with Davolterra. It's a French company that is developing preventive measures against this C. diff disease. And here, this is a rather dynamic company that has still products under development, where the bank gave a 20 million loan that would, be considered rather, I would say, high risk, in the sense that certainly if such a company had maybe approached a conventional commercial bank, they would have been considered to be too early for such a financing, because there are maybe no revenues yet. However, we were able to take that risk because we also have an arrangement with the European Commission where they cover some of that risk for us. Now, so Davolterra was in that infectious diseases space. We have also financed portfolio of R&D projects of larger pharmaceutical companies like USB in Belgium, which is a mid-cap pharma companies. Here, what we can do in that space among the larger pharma companies is we of course can give them a corporate loan to their balance sheet, but very often they are quite cash rich. What they have, where their constraint lies, is on their P&L. And they're looking for structures that give them a certain relief on the P&L, meaning that the R&D that they spend there have to be ways to neutralize the spend with the revenue, and hence in the case of UCB, we had a very interesting risk-sharing arrangement where we took the risk on the underlying compounds under development. This is a model that we are also exploring with other companies and are always open to assess if there are interested parties.
And you've got a report coming out soon, I understand.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's so this life science report, as I said, was important. It was commissioned by the European Commission. In fact, they were looking to see to what extent are we actually, our current schemes, both the grants by the European Commission, but also these financial instruments that we are managing, are they fit for purpose? Are they actually covering the gap? Is there a gap? And indeed, it looked at 4 clusters: the Golden Triangle in Southeast England, at Barcelona as a biocluster, at Munich, and at an emerging biocluster in Poland near Krakow. So what came out of the study is, on the one hand, you do need to put more money into the venture capital sort of business model that has played a very important role in the European life science space, has shown some attractive returns, but needs to become bigger in size. However, that alone as an instrument does not meet all the needs of pharmaceutical companies. The study also showed that there's kind of a pack mentality where, unfortunately, money does go very often into similar areas, and people. So we have certain disease areas like cardiovascular oncology that get a lot of funding, but others maybe don't get as much, and they would be nevertheless quite important. So the question is, how can maybe the public sector intervention be more effective in spreading, so to speak, the funding across many disease areas, but also how can we tap into the deep institutional money in insurance companies, in pension funds, that actually should also perhaps go into this space, you know, as we have it on the climate front, but why don't we have yet health bonds, so to speak, like green bonds? And the question is, what could the public sector do better in order to get that money into this space? So the study hopefully will give some impetus, some food for thought, and certainly as a European Investment Bank, we hope to be playing a role in improving the financial landscape.
Well, we'll look forward to A, seeing the report, and B, seeing the fruits of the European Investment Bank's involvement across the healthcare sector coming to the fore, and learning more as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So watch the space.
Will do. Shiva, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adrian.
For more information about PharmaVentures, visit our website